Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series. We cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, today's chapters are 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 and Psalm 73. Now, I'm down here in the foundations of a building that my son-in-law is busy with, and it's the perfect place to talk to you about Paul once again digging around in the foundations of a church, concerning himself with the building of this church. So we had a new book today, 2 Thessalonians. What had happened is Paul had written 1 Thessalonians. Remember, he planted this church originally, actually, in Acts chapter 17. You can go and read the story there. He had no sooner written 1 Thessalonians when news got back to him that the same issues were actually getting worse. And so what he does in this book is that he writes again to do 3 things. 1, encourage the church in the face of persecution, because that seems to have intensified. 2, to bring clarity on the return of the Lord Jesus, because some people had been a little bit concerned about that. And then 3, to speak to the idle and tell them, come on, take regular jobs. You can't just sit around waiting for Jesus to return. You've got to get on with life. And so he begins by saying this: Paul, and then Silvanus, who is also called Silas, and Timothy, write this letter to you. And he says, listen, I boast about you. I boast about your perseverance. And what he's trying to do is he's telling them that suffering and persecution is sometimes part of the package. But Jesus suffered, and we're following Jesus. So he says this. He says, don't worry. Verse 6, God will repay those who are coming up against you. You don't need to do it. He'll punish them. And when will he do it? He will do it when he returns. So he brings this great theme up that he will visit again. He'll return, and he says, with this in mind, I constantly pray for you. I pray that God strengthens you and gets you ready for a life in Jesus. Now, that's 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. Now, Psalm 73 was written by Asaph, who was that great composer, the great musician that was in the time of David. And he says this in verse 2. He says, I nearly lost my foothold. He said, I nearly slipped. I nearly wiped out. Because I envied the arrogant when I saw their prosperity. How often is that the case? We look over the fence, you try to live a life following Jesus, and it seems like the wicked are prospering. If you're young, people are, being promiscuous, or they're getting drunk and just partying their life away. And it seems like they're having a great, great time. And so he says, verse 12, this is what the wicked are like. They're always free. They're free of care, and they go on amassing wealth. He says, when I look at it, I'm nearly tempted to follow them. And he says, verse 13, surely in vain I've kept my heart pure. I've been afflicted. He says, when I tried to understand all this, it troubled me. Verse 16. I'm sure some of you can identify with this. And surely there's a shortcut. Surely there's a shortcut. Surely there must be another way. It troubled me deeply till, verse 17 says, till I entered the sanctuary of God. Just like I came into the presence of God. And then I understood their final destiny. Yet I am always with you. This is the assurance that he gets in verse 23. And you hold my right hand. My flesh and my heart may fail, but my God is my strength of my heart and my portion forever. He says, when I come into God's sanctuary and I see him, things change. And I suddenly get bearing again. When I read this text, I think about my kids, actually. When I raise my kids, they know that I love them. And as long as that's in view, they can ask me for things. They can ask me for fun. They can ask me for a submachine gun. They weren't going to get the submachine gun. So it's not every time you go before the Lord, say, God, separate me from this. Give me that. Give me that. God doesn't just give you everything that you ask for. Just like a good parent doesn't give all his toddlers what they ask for. But what makes the psalmist say, I can relax. When I'm in his presence and I know he's got the evil covered. He's got me covered. He's got my future covered. That's the place that the psalmist gets to. Well, I trust as you read this, God speaks to you. God bless you.